We have big questions in education, and that's what we get into just now. Our guest is in the hot seat of the Situation Room. Dr. Julius Otundo is the Dean, School of Education at Riara University. Dr. Otundo, good morning.
Good morning to. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to meet you here today.
Asante sana.
Good.
Thank you for coming. Like I said, you're in the hot seat of the Situation Room. We're talking about something that has gripped everybody's attention because we're coming to crunch time when it comes to some of these things. But we'll get into that in just a minute. CT goes to a different African country every week. He comes with a proverb from that country every day. And he's going to share that proverb, and we'd like you to be able to interpret that for us. Is that all right?
Okay.
Okay.
This country has many distinctions. Well, one is an archipelago. It's not the only one that has what you call extensive groups of islands forming a nation. No. But one of the distinguishing features is one that has bedeviled this continent for a long time. It's called coups. This country has experienced 20 coups and attempted coups since it got its independence in July 1975. Those are very many coups. So let's look at something more pleasant coming from that country.
Okay.
Let's look at the proverb. The thread follows the path of the needle.
The thread follows the path of the needle.
Yes, the thread follows the path of the needle.
All right. I may bring it up in different contexts, in essence of looking at the growth of people. For example, the thread follows the path of the needle. It could also mean monkey see, monkey do between the young and the old. So they follow and watch us on what we do. So if my child is likely going to follow exactly what I do on my path. And also, I can bring it in context of the nation. Possibly we also follow our leaders in whatever they do. If they do it right, we will do it right. If our culture is culture of speaking lies to justify and make it truth, that is what happens to even the followers.
You put it very well.
Very well.
Yes.
Very well. Okay. And so we're getting into, we're asking a question this morning. And that question is Kenya ready for the transition of grade 9 to senior school? And that is what we're going to start with today. We know the conversations around all of this. Grade 9 essentially being the last year of lower secondary, according to the CBC. And now we're also asking that the grade 9 learners choose pathways into which they're going to take their courses, whether they go the humanities way or whether they go the STEM way or any other way. But the question is, in that transition, because this is a transition, that CBC then gives you transition years. Grade 3 is a transition year. Grade 6 is a transition year. And then grade 9 is a transition year. Are we ready for that transition? And that's where we start off that conversation this morning.
Thank you. I first want to say that I am one of the key proponents and supporters of CBC. But however, I will highlight the biggest challenges that we have. And from it, we can be able to deduct whether we are ready or not ready. We could be ready and we could not be ready, but the major weighting is on the part of our preparedness as a country. And some of the areas that we're struggling with CBC, and particularly on the transition between grade 9 and grade 10. One, Kenya has got a total of 11,000 senior schools, thereabout. It's 11,000 with some hundreds on top, senior schools, with 10,000 of them being public and about 1,000 and something being private. That is senior school. Interestingly and shockingly, we have 35,000 and some hundreds on top primary schools. And that means we have that, and that's where junior schools are domiciled. So we are looking at, if you drive on Thika Road in Nairobi and you're coming on superhighway very, very fast, when you reach around Pangani, you get slowed into one stretch. And that's why you'll see matatus and everyone trying to fly over left and right to see where to overlap, because everyone is struggling for that small space. Because the infrastructure on that road system has not provided for entry into the city. So that congestion comes by. That is the scenario in which we are going to face with the transition of grade 9 to grade 10. Because we are looking at a bigger population coming into a narrow path. So many students coming from so many primary schools or junior schools narrowing down into to senior schools. There has been this assumption that the spaces that were left for senior schools basically are still available for the incoming junior school, that is grade 10. But that is not the reality on the ground.
How so?
Yeah, the schools still went on admitting the provision in terms of the spaces allocated to most of the senior schools, and most of those spaces are actually occupied.
But to teach what?
But you see, if you had 5 streams of say Form 3, now you can admit 10 because you have space, and that's what many of the schools have done. So this assumption that we have enough space in senior schools is not the real thing on the ground. And you can do a study on many of the public schools. They will tell you that we were already overstretched. Sometimes I've gone round to be able to check on teaching practice for teachers, and what do you find? You find a classroom that has basically 80 to 100 students, or 70. So these schools were overstretched. So what they did now a kind of say, let's use the resources available. So basically, some of those resources are actually being utilized as we speak. Even the teachers we thought that could be enough, basically is not the real thing on the ground. So we are going to face the issues of infrastructure constraints. Because remember, when it comes to STEM, we have pure sciences, and many of our public schools, or our secondary schools rather, have pure sciences. They have laboratories, many of them. Then we have the applied sciences under STEM. But many of them do not have all the facilities under applied sciences.
Many of them do not have any.
Many of them do not have this.
Yeah.
So much of the pure sciences are available. But applied sciences, we could have a few schools with home science workshops or laboratories. You could have some with computer, but not well furnished. But other areas of applied sciences, basically, because applied science, not only applied, but STEM has pure sciences, applied and technological studies. And you discover that most of the schools, we have had so much of pure sciences because we basically knew that it's biology, chemistry, physics, and that's it. Issues of workshops is a challenge. So we're going to face infrastructure constraints, and that is going to affect the outcome of many of the learners moving from grade 9 to grade 10. And these are things that should never be assumed. And that already is going to affect as well the provision of free basic education. Article 53 of our Constitution, Section A and B, is very clear that we need to provide free basic education to all the learners in this country.
What about teachers?
I'm getting there. So the infrastructure, first of all, is a big challenge. Now we come to issues of teachers. There was this assumption that the teachers who remained at senior school are not fully utilized. You know, first of all, the teachers in senior schools have always been overstretched. They have always taught back to back. So in essence, the removal of just one class alone could not really ascertain that those teachers somehow became free. And then there is the aspect of these teachers having been utilized in the kind of expanded classes, where if you had 5 streams, you now have 6 streams, or you have 7 streams. So that's already the case. And as well, when it comes to teachers, you find many of the schools that we called national or extra county have so many of the teachers they have employed on board. We have the board teachers. I like the fact that the government is keen to say we have employed 76 teachers. But what we need to be speaking, 76,000 teachers. But what we need to separate is what intern teachers and permanent and pensionable.
Yes.
Those are 2 different stories.
Absolutely.
Those are 2 different stories. And actually the biggest weaknesses we have faced in junior school is that assumption that we have employed teachers. Because if you employed a teacher who has a specialization in English and literature in grade 9, and this teacher is meant to teach almost up to agriculture in the grade 9, that means the children moving from grade 9 to grade 10 are inadequately prepared even in areas of STEM in that specific school.
Absolutely.
And some of the teachers also who have upgraded from primary and done their degrees, some of their degrees are basically not degrees aligned to specializations in CBC. So what happens is that we may assume, but these children moving from grade 9, and I interview many of them, they are not well prepared in where they are going, and even the issue of pathways. By the way, the issue of pathways should not even be an issue. What should be an issue here is the subject tracks. The discussion we should be having is not about pathways. We should be having about subject tracks first. I am leaving grade 9 with 9 learning areas. I have 7 learning areas in grade 10. Those are subject tracks. So we start with the interest of the learner in specific subject tracks. That information is even lacking in the students. So what we are saying, and I go to the thread, follows the path of the needle. The needle here is this teacher who is not well trained and well prepared to guide the learner. So if the teacher basically guides the learner in a wrong way, the learner will just follow the path, because the learner is a Maina and doesn't know how to interpret some of these things.
Absolutely.
So we really have a challenge there. So teachers is another area that we need to separate permanent and pensionable teachers, and then also try to categorize them, get statistics to realize how many STEM teachers do we have in our senior schools aligned to those pathways. The adequacy of social sciences and the adequacy of arts and sports. We should remember that during the 844 system, which wasn't a curriculum as per se, it was a structure, that we killed other aspects of like performing art. So we only see students who go for music festivals. And if you ask a student, they just tell you something called music festival.
Yep.
And that's when they get interested. But you realize most of the people training those students to go into those performing art are basically externals. They are not internal teachers in many of those schools. They are people who are hired. Those are the truths
For
on the
that
ground.
period.
They are hired for that period. So you find that school A is top to nationals. But if you chase after the scripter, the one who wrote the script, you chase after the one who trained, you might find that he's not even a teacher on the compound. And that is the real things. So we are talking about performing, we're talking about where we have arts and sports. But we do not have enough human resource in many of our senior schools.
So this is the thing, essentially, Doc, that we are saying, even this pathway, because we're going to come back and ask the question again with some of the things that you've been able to break down so far, and I'm sure some more. We'll ask the question again that are we actually ready for a transition? Because essentially what we're trying to do is that we're trying to put a roof atop a building for which there is no foundation. That is what we are trying to do. We cannot say that we are going into pathways where we don't even have the people who are essentially going to give the instruction on those pathways trained themselves. We are talking about STEM, for example, where we've already been given the statistics that we are lacking greatly in terms of science teachers in Kenya. We don't have enough.
I think because I'm a teacher trainer, Kenya produces enough science teachers.
But where are they?
Where they go to, if you have noticed lately, I happen to be an expert in international curriculum as well. And if you have noticed lately in Kenya first, after the coming in of CBC, the number of schools that have grown offering alternative curricula, either IB or British curriculum, has incredibly increased. And you see those institutions, they are very, very, very keen on mathematics,
and
sciences, and languages. So that's where the teachers go, because they have a better pay, they are cared for better than we care for our own teachers. And I'm speaking generally, even between public education and private education. Then let me also proceed and say, and many of these teachers are also transiting and going out of the country.
Absolutely.
Many of them. So Kenya produces enough. but we do not have mechanisms to retain them in our systems. That is why the problem is.
So we are saying that when we say that we do not have teachers, we actually don't then.
We don't have enough.
We don't have enough teachers
Yes.
for the purpose for which we are looking for them.
Yes.
So one would imagine, and I simplify these things sometimes, that this is where I want to go. One would hope that I'm trying to build this house, that I have the building blocks, I have the cement, I have the sand. But we've already seen this picture of the house, and we have now put in place a curriculum. We have told people to choose pathways. We have said that when you get to grade 9, you'll do 1, 2, 3. But we don't have the building blocks. So I'm made to wonder that the implementers of all of this, do they see what we see, or is there a hope that somehow these things will just come together?
I don't think I would solely kind of blame implementers, not even what we call the semi-autonomous government agencies. Let me first of all put a few things on board that is going to affect everybody. There is the issue of equity and access. A student who is going to go to, say, to a school that has better infrastructure, like the formally identified as national schools, and a student who is going to go to a marginalized area without facilities. You see already the issue of equity comes in, the issue of accessibility, because the student in that marginalized area is not able to access some of these facilities. There is the issue of therefore affecting the parents in such a way that anybody today standing on the pulpit and to tell parents that education in Kenya is free, that is not something to trust and say it is true. It is not free, because parents are going to be overstretched in many of these institutions. Because if the schools cannot provide, because the government is not having enough funds, of course the parents will be asked to chip in. There's the issue of curriculum monitoring in itself. Do we have even enough quality assurance and standards officers to be able to effectively monitor the aspect of CBC? There's the aspect of parents' understanding on this concept. So what am I saying here? If any member of parliament is listening to me, and I have had many of them on media, even trying to blame the education, the people in education, but I ask them one simple question: how many of them raise a single bill asking for more funding for education? If there is any that you know of, you can say, because I've not had any member of parliament who goes to parliament with an aim of raising a bill to increase funding in education with justification. They are not doing that. CDF, for example, we are talking about the aspect of ICT being a major component in this current curriculum, because not even the current curriculum, the current state of things, we're talking about coding and robotics. And investing in a robotics lab is not something small. It's not something cheap to go by. But then, if the schools do not have enough funding and this capitation is even delayed, how do we expect that we are going to have the robotics classrooms and the robotics labs and all that? And that means that we need to focus on education as a major functionality of production. Because that's where we are losing it as a country. We are looking at it more of a consumption as opposed to a production center. Kenya, where we have reached, we need even to be thinking about exporting education. Why? CBC talks about competencies. The British National Curriculum, or Cambridge, talks about learner attributes. The IB talks about, the International Baccalaureate talks about learner profiles. When you go to World of Education and look at its key concept, it also goes to look at the aspect of learner competencies. If you go to even a curriculum like Maria Montessori and all that, what am I trying to say here? CBC is a very good curriculum, because it brings us on international standards very, very well. But where we are losing it is investment into making it look like a curriculum that can proceed ahead.
How would you rate this implementation in Kenya?
Sorry?
How would you rate the implementation of CBC?
Oh my goodness. Because one of the things I'm good at, I'm a philanthropic and I just like helping the society. I have personally decided to open a WhatsApp group, and this week I will be starting my first webinar with teachers. at my cost, I would be hosting teachers every week just to take them through the best way to implement a curriculum called CBC. This is my personal initiative. I don't need permission from anyone because the teachers are ill prepared. They are not prepared at all. Even the ones who are claiming that we have gone through the full circle from early years as we go, there are still a lot of gaps. Because they go into the curriculum particularly to teach the content.
Yes.
But not to trace, because CBC is keen on assessment of competencies. Our teachers are not even keen on competency assessment. How you can assess a competence? Because what keeps you here too is your proficiency. It's not about how much knowledge you had in high school or in university. It is your proficiency. But then the tools we have at the moment, teachers are not able to interpret them. Teachers are not able to have activities that can be assessed.
Is it a learn on the go kind of thing, or must you have it before? You know how you can say, you know what, I can understand what you're saying and I'm a good learner and I'm a fast learner, I can learn on the go. Is it one of those things that you can say as we go along, or should we have made sure before that this assessment of competencies as a trained resource is something that you should have had before embarking on a new curriculum?
I do not know whether you have ever driven a manual car. I did, and I still drive a manual car. I will tell you, it is very difficult for even a driver who has driven for 10 years and has never driven a manual car to drive it. So the issue of CBC is not a one-off thing. It's a real process. While the universities and teacher training colleges should enhance the skills and competencies in how to train the teachers, but it is a long process, because while it is on goal, when you graduate today, like if you had the first graduate joining your studio today, I'm sure her presentation or his presentation will not be like yours. But what is happening is that the issue of even teacher motivation, I think when you work with a demotivated group of teachers, they basically sometimes find it very difficult to absorb. There was the issue of attitude as well. The implementation of CBC as well has been met with a lot of attitude issues. Then there are issues also politically as well. There was a bit of confusion of where we are moving on, we are not moving on. And so in this case, while it is a period where you can practice as you go along, but it also requires a lot of teacher investment in terms of time, government investment in terms of profession development. We had this program, teacher profession development. Our university, Riara University, was one of the accredited institutions to do teacher profession development. But it was made with hurdles because politically first, the government of the day had promised that they were going to pay for the teachers. So teachers just load, and it's only 6,000 shillings per year, which is basically 500. And that is continuous profession development. One of the key components in that program is implementation of CBC and inclusion. But you see that program has come down because teachers are not in it. So in the issue of teacher profession development is critical, and it requires a lot of funding in that case.
And we expect that we will have a curriculum that is working, but we're not ready to put in the ingredients.
Yes, that's it.
I have a problem with that.
That's it.
You began by saying that you are among the people who support the CBC. Well, let me ask the question. Was it absolutely necessary to bring in the CBC? It's a question that has been asked. Was it not possible to graft and to include components of the curriculum that would have made CBC what it is without necessarily overhauling the entire system?
Thank you for that question. We have complained for a long time about same forests, different monkeys, and aligning it to politicians. They come with the same style because the forest possibly is the same. So if we are going to say that, first of all, 844 wasn't a curriculum, it was a system. And it left out a major component called early childhood. That's why it's 844. It didn't have anything on early childhood. And learning starts from that level. But then it would have been possible, but it would have been very difficult to really style this person with new clothes. It would have been very difficult, and it would have been even more expensive.
Why?
Doing that, because first, when you change that structure, you'll still end up with the same aspect of CBC. Actually, CBC is not even about subjects or whatever. Subjects are subjects. Subjects are the same. We just change terms, learning areas, and all that. But the aspect of competencies was missing. And because we were used to a structure where the knowledge based was the issue, the day, or the issue of the day, and teachers went to class to tell students. And I would give you a few scenarios where a teacher goes to class to teach about pollination, and students cram and speak after the teacher. And the teacher goes ahead to ask them what I call a stupid question. Have you understood? And all the students...
Why is it stupid?
It's a stupid question because you cannot measure understanding. It is not possible.
What do you measure then?
What you need to measure is the outcome. And how do you measure the outcome? How many of these students become farmers after learning pollination? So how many of them become even orchard farmers? How many of them become beekeepers after learning pollination? If I asked many people even how to make the mixed African tea, the process, they will tell me you boil milk, after it's boiled up to the brim, then you add tea leaves. And it's mixed African tea. What are you looking for? You're looking at the color of the tea leaves. So what do you boil first? Water and tea leaves for the color to change. I am sure if you asked into, that's how she prepares her tea. The old way, the way of cramming, but not applying it. So the aspect of competencies brings in the aspect of what is the learner able to do. Besides which, I told you about the other forms of curricula, where British curriculum talks about attributes, which are the same as competencies. IB talks about profiles, the same as competencies. When our students graduate from here and go to other countries, they are subjected to either a one-year internship or a one-year course to align with. But now with CBC, because we are tracking competencies, if it is done well, what the world requires of a student graduate is about the aspect of, are you able to use the knowledge learned? If you asked our graduates today, even PhD graduates, what a capstone project is, they'll tell you they have no idea. The result of this phone is as a result of a capstone project. Innovations. It was going to be very difficult to mingle all these aspects within the 844 system and the structure and its content. So better off, why not just buy new clothes to dress up this education in a better way, as opposed to just try to style it. You know, if for example, you and I, we have advanced in age.
Absolutely true.
Yes.
Yes.
And you hear sometimes people say we have this perfume. If you place it here, it can stretch your skin to become young. And I have seen people buy some of these things. You see, it doesn't work. 844 had been in existence for 32, growing to 33 years, without review, without a single adjustment. And that is already for a country, it was hurting us. We have so many unemployed people. Why? For one reason, we produced more people who only ask for jobs as opposed to people who can innovate, create, or implement. Like your children and my children, for example, if you're in business, why would teachers even get concerned to know that Dr. Otundo's children can do what the father does? They are not interested. So you have a son who graduates and cannot join you in business because he was told, after you graduate, you must get this job. Look at accounts today, where automation has come in and many jobs are being replaced by automation. But we need to have students who can innovate and disrupt the disruptions caused by AI disruptions caused by innovation, disruptions caused by anything that is around them, which we could not create from 844. And even because it was about go to school, actually we were doing schooling as opposed to education.
So, Doc, as we talk about CBC, you clearly pointed out the fact that we are not ready for it for its full implementation. Yet, it is what it is. It is what is there. It is what we have. Because come the transition period, students will still go into these classes. They will face the same teachers you say are not ready. Which begs the question: which way Kenyan education?
One, all of us must be part, and even this discussion is part of enabling CBC.
How so?
Because while we could not be ready, but I'm still a strong supporter that this is the best curriculum so far for this country. Mm-hmm. How best? You see, like this conversation we are having, I would speak to CDF, for example, the MPs and the CDF. They need to redirect their expenditure in the use of CDF when it comes to schools. If I hadn't gone to school, having learnt in a small village school in some place in Western, I would not be seated here. So education being an equalizer, we would want to ask our members of parliament to try and just become a little biased and redirect their investment towards increasing the infrastructure in our schools. I'll also want to say that teachers' attitude in terms of improvement, there's also a way we can also self-learn at times. So it is important that we are where we are, and we're not going to change CBC to something else. Whether students are going to go to those high schools and learn under a tree, that is not going to change because we are already there. It will be more expensive when we say we are reversing to something else. The only thing that we shall have weak implementation eventually, outcomes will not be well. And of course, the first group of the learners in grade 9 going to grade 10 may not get the best outcomes because they have really been affected.
And this is a problem.
Yes, they will not.
This grade 9 have borne the brunt of this entire thing.
Yes.
They were in grade 3.
Yes.
They're the pioneers.
Yes.
They were in grade 3 when this thing went belly up. They were in grade 6 when they were transitioning to grade 7, where everybody said, okay, move them, don't move them, stay here, don't stay, move. They were there when the grade 7 books were supposed to come. They didn't come until the end of term 2. These are the same group of learners who are now in this grade 9 who are being asked to select. They're the guinea pigs of this thing.
Yeah,
and they're the ones who are getting the short end of the stick, unfortunately. And then we learn after the fact.
And even after in that selection, I have interviewed a lot of learners. They basically do not know anything, because when you ask them, they tell you, most of our teachers as well, when you ask them this question, they don't know. Because we need to understand, even parents, they need to understand the learner's interest top on the list. Then the learner's ability and the learner's attitude. And I'll give you a simple example. The learner says, I want to become a medical doctor. And that means STEM. The learner has the ability. But you ask the learner, what do you fear most? This learner wants to become a surgeon. So you ask, what do you fear most in life? Then he says, blood. The learner has interest in medicine, and particularly being a surgeon. The same learner has what?
A phobia for blood.
He has had the ability, but has phobia for blood. So which kind of surgeon is going to be? Meaning that there should be a teacher for learner support system. We don't have learner support systems in our schools, where you are guiding this learner on how to adjust on the attitude. The parent should also understand how to create a learner support system. But remembering that, again, these parents were not of the same standard. While Dr. Otundo here will speak all the English and interact with the learners and share with his children globally on how the world is. My mother is a guardian to this orphan who was left by the son and the daughter. So she's a parent in that school. Do you think she understands the level I understand? So the schools need to create strong learner support systems. And this does not come easily. It comes with also investment in teacher training. And so before you ask the next, so that means that our members of parliament need to work more. It's unfortunate that we come from a society where most politicians want to make us remain poor so that we follow their path. What they say, you just follow because you are poor.
They are the needle.
They are the needle. That is it. So good people, have you had a state where you go to a community where even the poor calls you poor? Where the poor calls you poor? That is the state in which we are badly enough. If you go to some parts of this country, you find the poor calling the poor poor. But somehow there is a member of parliament in that area. Students are struggling even to understand simple things. Teachers cannot even understand simple things. But somehow there is no capitation and no one is speaking about it. We talk about 15,000 shillings in junior school, for example, for public education. Have we ever seen what we call the unit costing? What that breakdown leads to? Because when you look at the unit costing for that 15,000 that is being given for capitation, that's very little money to fund what is needed in that school.
Because here you are talking about learner support systems, for example, and that means that you have folks who are trained in support. We're talking about people who have gone through specialized training, who've practiced to a certain degree, and that stuff does not come cheap. Whether you are in the public system or in the private system, it doesn't come cheap. But then this leads to my question that when we hear these things, it would appear as though they're no-brainers, but they're not. Because it would need an almost graduated sense of thinking and interpretation of what's going on here to say that even when you're developing these systems, that you have people who have an understanding fundamentally and then even graduated to say, let us be part of this planning. Because this thing happened and it was as though, okay, we said we have a new curriculum and we are starting in January. Okay, let's go and let's start. And we didn't even look at what comes later. So my question is it not necessary to have folks who are versed in these areas and have a graduated understanding to be part of the planning and implementation of these things?
Super good. All those folks are there and very much available. But the biggest problem we have, education in this country has been politicized. So much. To the extent that the semi-autonomous agencies have been held captive. Let me start with the commissions first. The Teacher Service Commission, I'll tell you for free, has been held captive. Why a sane member of parliament would pick a letter to hand over and post? Honestly, you have held the Teacher Service Commission captive politically.
It's even in the headline, and let me read it for you today. Fury over TSC employment letters dished out to politicians.
That's it.
Muranga MP Betty Jerry Maina's revelation that MPs allied to the government were recently handed TSC employment letters to give their constituents has kicked up a storm over irregular hiring.
Yeah, and so you see, TSC as a commission has been held captive. But TSC is a commission that has been constituted in the constitution. For any change on TSC, it has to be constitutionally changed. That means there should be public participation. So TSC has been held captive. The semi-autonomous agencies have been held captive.
The commissions?
No, not the commissions. We have like NEC is a semi-autonomous government agency. If you're not funding it, you have held it captive. Because you must fund it to train teachers on modes of assessment. In fact, we are going to have incredibility issues. We're going to have issues of credible assessment because teachers have not been effectively trained, and possibly, and I'm not speaking for NEC, but possibly NEC has not been well funded. That's a semi-autonomous government agency. We have the KICD. We talk about KICD in itself doesn't fund itself. There is capitation for KICD. But if capitation, for example, is given to KICD late, at which point will KICD produce their books in time? Most of these semi-autonomous government agencies are now being told, do alternative provision of resources. That is why when you go to KICD, you find there is a conference, there is a restaurant, there are sleeping places. So what is their mandate? Is it curriculum development or hospitality? But you are pushing, we have pushed them to the wall to get there. So we are saying that if we do not politicize education, then all these things we are talking about will be things of the past.
But should we? Sorry, CT, please go ahead.
We're now to ask, how do you train your teachers? The things you've said. Does the curriculum that you have at the university provide for a teacher who will be well-rounded to meet the needs that you've actually pointed out very, very clearly?
Good. Currently, we are using what we call competency-based education and training for universities. So meaning that the students we are graduating from now as we move on are CBC ready. And for universities, you realize the training, even before, we were using more of Socratic methods, inquiry-based methods, research-based, particularly for education. That's why these teachers will go for teaching practice. And there's a big variance between a teacher trained in university. In fact, I want to be biased here, that moving forward, we should have minimum qualifications for all our teachers to become degree holders. Leave alone this issue of diploma. We have just got the global way for one particular reason. We shall have one specific structure on how teachers come out. Because remember, we have universities for degree, and formerly we used to have teacher training colleges for P1. Now they have diploma. I have no idea if there's any concurrency in between this. So even if universities did their best as the teachers exit, but we are going to have transition of a learner from the primary handled by a trainee or a teacher trained from a different source of training. Then they come to us. They come to teachers who are now graduate teachers. But having said that, it also differs from one university to the other. I will tell you, for example, in Riara, one of the things we were keen on, whether there was the new curriculum or not, we were keen on very keen on community service learning, which is a key concept in this curriculum. And our students, we do not say you can graduate if you have not done community service learning. We are very keen on innovation. We are a university that nurtures innovators. But that means that it differs from one university to another. We started using outcome-based approach of university training even before we thought about even the issue of CBC came in. So we produce graduates who are able to use the knowledge learned. And I will proudly say that if universities used the outcome-based approach, competence-based approach, introduced their students to research earlier, at entry point. The problem we do in universities is that we want to introduce research at the last point, and then we introduce research as a topic and as a unit, as opposed to be part of life of the student.
As an integral
part. Yeah. So that is why you find that a master's student is still asking someone to support in writing his thesis. A PhD student is still doing the same. Then we graduate so many of these people, many of us who cannot write a proposal for funding. We are talking about CBC without money. We have how many PhD holders in this country?
Very many.
Very many. If each one of us came up with a proposal for funding for CBC, would we be part of a solution to lack of resources? Because in essence, where we are headed to, if that is not done in terms of resources, we are going to strain parents.
So essentially, this is a typical solution where we are slapping lipstick on a pig that's already rolling around in the mud. That's what we're looking at now. And we are saying that in the next couple of weeks, when students come back, the grade 9s are going to come back after this 3-week holiday, which they've embarked on this week. And they're going to come back and going to be asked to select pathways. It's like this thing is already moving. The train is already left the station. It's going. And we want to get down to the bottom of the hill. We're going to get there either way. Whether we're going to get there with stitches and crutches, at least we will get to the end of the hill and we'll say, we have reached. How do we get rid of this at least mentality whereby we're saying, look, did they finish grade 9? Yes. Are they in grade 10? Yes. Will they finish? Yes. We'll close our eyes, we'll reach the end, and then they'll go. We're not looking at substance. We are looking at, just top layers. Will we be able?
Because we are already there. I don't know whether you have driven through. I live in a mist area in Limuru, so I sometimes, like this morning, I had to drive through mist. So sometimes where we are, but you have to push yourself to pass.
You get through it anyway.
Yes, that's where we are. The mist is here. Fog, in fact, not just mist. We are with fog. So we will drive with a bit of difficulty. You keep losing the track on the road and you slow down. That's where we are. but apparently the impact it has on the first group of grade 9 is my biggest worry.
Yeah.
And then the kind of discrepancies between private and public
Unmatched.
is unmatched. And I also want to challenge our private schools that they have so many private schools. Could they try as much as possible and invest in secondary schools? Because that is another area that I told you that the kind of struggle we are going to have in terms of these spaces will be worse than driving on Jogoo Road in Nairobi. Yeah, so that is the biggest thing. So I'm saying, can private schools investors try to see whether they can invest in some of the senior schools to be able to decongest what is going to happen with the grade 9s? And then for the government, I've said that I think members of parliament need to be keen on seeking for more funding for education, because if we go on the way we are going, it's not going to be. I'm only worried about parents as well, because parents are going to have to really bear a heavy load. There are so many things parents are going to be asked to provide.
They're already being asked. It's already started.
But it's going to be worse as we go along, particularly for senior school. Yeah, and then the issue of also student support system is a challenge. The issue of discipline. Remember, we're going to have this grade 10 learner go to this senior school, boarding school, and meet a Form 3, who is how old?
A Form 3 is 17.
17.
Yeah.
And meet a Form 4. Unless schools establish strong support systems, there's going to be a problem where learners who are literally, how many years old? The grade 10s?
15, 14.
Yeah. And these ones, I know that they are exiting. And with the issues we've had with sometimes, we can't just say that our schools, boarding schools, are a small heaven on earth in terms of student welfare. The student welfare
is an issue.
The real things we took a ground is different from the things we talk about. So the issues of discipline will come in. The issues of parents struggling to understand even these pathways. One of the hurdles I think I can say is that possibly the media houses, you can be having continuous conversations just to help the parents on how to guide their students, because the key thing here is about the interest. The abilities may not be, parents may not understand some of this ability is particularly, but the interest is critical here. Indeed. What is the learner's interest? And that's it. And then the issues of assessment, because remember at seniors, at grade 9, 60% is going to take care of the KGSEA.
Yes.
But now, what is the credibility of the 40%?
Exactly.
And then what about the learner who has not been there? For example, I want to transit from this other curriculum and join at grade 10.
Grade 10.
So where is my 40%?
That I missed out on. All
those things are still areas of hurdle that we need to handle.
There is a lot that's up in the air. I mean, and we're still trying to get down the mountain where there's mist in the middle of it, right? And the hope is that as we continue to highlight a lot of these things, that really we can start to streamline them, at the very least for the good of the children who are going through this education system. Thank you for being here to highlight some of these things. We will definitely continue keeping these conversations front and center. He is the Dean of the School of Education at the Riara University. Dr. Julius Otundo has been here with us this morning. Thank you for being in the hot seat of the Situation Room today.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.